Hi, my name is Elise, and if you'd asked me 5 years ago what life at 42 would look like, I would have said stable, predictable, safe. But life has a way of redrawing maps you thought were permanent. I used to be the one everyone leaned on. As a therapist, I spent my days helping others untangle their grief, their trauma, their chaos. I knew how to stay calm, how to speak gently, how to hold a silence just long enough for someone to breathe into it. But I never told anyone that I often left my sessions feeling like I was holding more than just their pain. A year ago, my marriage ended. On paper, it was clean, signed, filed, over. But emotionally, well, endings don't care about paperwork. Some mornings, I still expected the sound of the garage door rising. The jingle of keys dropped into the ceramic bowl by the sink. My ex-husband Adam had become a stranger long before he left. But it wasn't until that last night when his anger snapped and our son Micah saw it that I realized staying was no longer strength. It was surrender. Micah was 17 when we left. Quiet, thoughtful, too observant for his own peace of mind. He didn't cry when we packed our bags. He just stared out the car window, jaw tight, hands still. It's been a year since that night. Our new place is small, just a 2-bedroom ranch with creaky floors and a porch that needs repainting, but it's ours. I filled it with soft things, warm lamps, lavender candles, secondhand rugs that don't quite match but feel like comfort. Micah's still quiet. Quieter, even. He eats dinner with headphones around his neck. Says thanks when I cook, nods when I ask about school. But the space between us feels different now, like we're speaking through glass. Still, there are small signs. A mug of chamomile tea left by my bedside. A blanket folded after I've dozed off on the couch. Once I caught him looking at a photo from when he was 4, grinning, icing on his face, and his arms looped around my neck. He didn't say anything, just stared at it like he was trying to remember who we used to be. Then came the evening that cracked something open. We were sitting in the living room, a muted episode of Jeopardy flickering on the TV. I was finishing up notes from a difficult session, one of those divorce mediations that leaves a heaviness you can't quite wash off, when Micah spoke. Do you miss him? I looked up slowly. Your dad? He nodded, eyes still on the screen. Sometimes, I said, but not the man he became. I miss the version of him I married, the one who made me laugh. Micah didn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, he wasn't like that with me. I turned toward him. I know. We sat in that stillness. Not awkward, just real, present. I never wanted to take him away from you, I said, softer now. But I couldn't let him keep taking pieces of me. Micah looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time, I saw something shift in his face. Understanding, maybe. Or forgiveness. I get it, he said. And I believed he did. Later that night, I found him asleep on the couch, curled into himself like he used to as a kid. I tucked a blanket around him and stood there for a while, watching him breathe. My son. My anchor. We were still figuring things out. But for the first time in a long time, we weren't doing it alone. And then, just when I thought things were starting to settle, he made me dinner. I walked through the door that night expecting silence. It had been a long day. One of those where the weight of everyone else's pain seemed to cling to your skin. A couple I'd been working with for months had finally said the words neither wanted to say out loud. Sometimes helping people find the truth feels more like guiding them to a cliff's edge. I kicked off my shoes at the entryway, unbuttoned my coat, and that's when I smelled it. Garlic, rosemary, something rich and warm drifting from the kitchen. I paused. It wasn't the scent of takeout or leftovers. It was home-cooked. Micah. I stepped inside, slowly, unsure of what I'd find, and there he was, standing at the stove sleeves, rolled up, a wooden spoon in hand, stirring with careful focus. He glanced back when he heard me. A little shy, a little proud. Figured you'd be wiped, he said. Hope it's okay I made dinner. I stood there, stunned. You. Cooked. He gave a half shrug. Just something simple. But it wasn't simple. It was intentional. It was kind. It was care made visible through steam and spices in a worn pot on a quiet Wednesday night. I dropped my bag to the floor and smiled. Really smiled, not the kind I gave clients or neighbors, but something softer, more real. That's really thoughtful, Micah. His smile reached his eyes. You're always the one doing everything. Thought maybe I could take a turn. We sat down at the kitchen table, just the two of us. His spaghetti was slightly overcooked, and the garlic bread a little too crispy, but it was perfect. Our knees brushed beneath the table as we ate, and for the first time in months, he didn't rush through his meal or retreat to his room. He talked about school, about a substitute teacher who kept calling him Michael despite the corrections, about a friend who confided in him during lunch, and how proud he felt to just listen and not judge. And then somewhere between bites of bread, he said, "My friend Jessie thinks you're too cool to be a therapist." I raised an eyebrow. Too cool. Micah grinned. Yeah. He said most therapists look like, I don't know, professors. You don't. I laughed, actually laughed, and to my surprise, so did he. A quiet chuckle, almost bashful, like the sound had forgotten how to leave his body and was learning all over again. That laugh was everything. It was the first hint of spring after a long gray winter. Later, we moved to the living room with a shoebox of old photos he'd pulled from the hall closet. Images of birthdays, beach trips, lazy mornings with pancake batter in our hair. Micah flipped through them slowly, like he was walking through his own memory. In one photo, he was about 5, face smeared with cake frosting, grinning, wide arms locked around my neck. Wow, he said, holding the photo up. You look young. I was young, I smirked. He tilted the photo, studying it. You haven't really changed. I gave him a look. Flattery, huh? He shook his head. I mean it. You look happy in this one. I leaned over to look at it again. He was right. That version of me, carefree, radiant, felt like someone I used to know, someone I hadn't seen in a while. That was before everything turned upside down, I murmured. Micah nodded. When I was a kid, I thought nothing could shake you. You were just solid. I blinked. His words caught me off guard. It's not a bad thing, he added quickly. It's just, now I see it. How much you must have kept to yourself. That hit me deeper than he knew. He wasn't just looking at me. He was seeing me. You've really grown, I whispered. Micah looked down the corners of his mouth, lifting. Didn't have much choice. I reached over gently, tucking a strand of hair behind his ear, an old gesture from when he was small. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. I'm proud of you, I said. He looked up, and then without a word, he leaned his head against my shoulder. Just like that. No tension, no apology, just warmth. We stayed that way, wrapped in a silence that didn't ache, one that felt whole. And in that moment, I realized something had shifted. Micah wasn't just coming back to me. We were finding each other again. And maybe something more. The days that followed felt lighter. Not in any grand, sweeping way, but in those small, everyday moments that often go unnoticed until they change you. Micah started joining me in the kitchen in the mornings. He'd pour himself a mug of coffee black with a splash of oat milk, then sit across from me in quiet companionship. He rarely said much, just stirred his cup, eyes half-lidded with sleep, shoulders hunched in that in-between posture of a boy becoming a man. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was easy, soft, like we were learning how to breathe in the same rhythm again. One morning, he laughed, really laughed at an old photo I'd pinned to the fridge. It was him at age 6 holding a turtle he'd found in the yard, his expression half awe, half panic. That laugh, it was quiet, almost embarrassed, but it was music. And I realized how much I'd missed the sound. A few nights later, I came home late from a back-to-back stretch of client sessions. Emotional fatigue clung to me like a second skin. I opened the door expecting darkness. Instead, there was light and the smell of something warm. Micah stood at the stove again, this time making soup, his hair a little messy, his focus fixed. Hey, he said without turning around. You okay? I blinked, caught off guard. Yeah, just tired. He turned, offering me a gentle smile. Then sit. I've got it. I sat at the table and watched him move. There was something so deliberate about the way he sliced vegetables, the way he stirred with care, the way he tasted and adjusted seasoning like it mattered. It wasn't about the food. It was about giving me something I hadn't asked for, but deeply needed. Care. From him. For me. We ate quietly, knees brushing again under the table, like some silent thread still tying us together. Later, we ended up on the porch, wrapped in a shared wool blanket, our mugs steaming with peppermint tea. The sky was dark stars, faint above the soft halo of street lamps. I don't know why I opened up that night. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, not with pity or worry, but with something gentler. Curiosity, respect. I wanted to help people because I didn't have anyone to help me. I said quietly, not when I really needed it. Micah didn't say anything at first. He just nodded, thoughtful. His thumb resting near mine on the armrest, not quite touching but close. You help me every day, he said after a pause. I turned toward him, unsure how to respond. Not as a mother, but as a person. That night I lay awake thinking about his words, about how much he'd changed, not just in his height or voice, or the way he moved through the world, but in how he saw me, and maybe how I saw him too. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was something steadier, more present. He was a man who had quietly held space for me to fall apart and start over. Then came his birthday. It was 3 days away when I realized I wanted to do something special. Something that reminded him of who we were, what we'd survived, what we were becoming. Not as a distraction, but as a celebration. So that morning, I woke before the sun. The house was quiet, still asleep. I slipped into a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years, soft at the waist, delicate at the neckline. It wasn't fancy, just thoughtful. I curled my hair, dabbed on a touch of blush, and fastened the silver pendant he'd given me last year. One word engraved in the center: Grace. I made his favorite cake from scratch, dark chocolate raspberry, filling a touch of orange zest in the frosting. As it cooled on the counter, I stood by the window in the soft gold of morning light, listening for footsteps. Then I heard them. And when Micah walked in, hair-tousled eyes still hazy with sleep, he stopped cold in the doorway. He just stared at me. And in that silence, something flickered in his expression. Something raw. Something real. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and wrapped his arms around me, tight. I've never seen you look so beautiful, he whispered. I held him there for a moment, Micah arms wrapped around me like I might disappear if he let go. It wasn't the kind of hug you give out of obligation. It was full body, full heart. And I felt it. Not just as his mother, as a woman, as someone who had stood in the ashes and started over. Thank you, I whispered against his shoulder. He didn't let go right away. When he finally stepped back, he looked at me, really looked, and there was something in his eyes I couldn't name. Affection, admiration, and something deeper. He smiled a little, breathless. I can't believe you did all this. I remember what you love, I said, gesturing to the cake. His smile widened. You always do. As I moved to slice it, he stayed close, his hand brushing mine, lingering just long enough for the air between us to shift again. That silence returned, but it was charged this time, like a string pulled too tight, humming in the space between us. Later, as we ate at the table, he kept glancing at me, not like a son admiring a parent, but like someone seeing a person they cherished. And every time I met his gaze, he didn't look away. It unsettled me. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made me feel seen completely. I want to do something for you, he said as I set down his second slice of cake. You're eating cake, I teased. You're already doing plenty. He shook his head, eyes serious now. No, I mean something real. I want to take you out. I blinked. Out, he nodded. Like dinner, just us, somewhere nice. Micah, you don't have to. I want to. His tone was firm, but gentle. You do everything for me. Just let me give you a night. Something in the way he said it left no room for protest. And honestly, I didn't want to say no. That night I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I wore a soft black dress with lace at the sleeves, understated, elegant. I let my hair fall loose and added just a hint of mascara. Not to impress anyone, just to feel like me again. When I stepped outside, Micah was already waiting by the car. Navy shirt, clean-cut pants. His posture straight, his jawline catching the streetlight just right. He looked older, not in age, in presence. When he saw me, his breath hitched. Wow, he said, voice low. You look, I raised a brow. Don't say it, I warned, teasing. He smiled, but his eyes held that same steady warmth. Okay, I won't. But I'm still thinking it. The restaurant he'd chosen was quiet, tucked near the river's soft jazz playing beneath the hum of conversations. Our table was by the window, candlelight flickering gently between us. He pulled out my chair, waited until I sat, ordered for both of us, carefully pronouncing the dishes he'd Googled beforehand. It was the kind of effort that didn't scream, "Look at me." It whispered, "You matter." As we waited for the food, he leaned forward. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About you. About everything." I braced for sentiment, but what came out of his mouth wasn't what I expected. "No one could have done what you did. Held it together like that. For me. For yourself." I opened my mouth to deflect, to say, "I'm your mom, it's what I'm supposed to do," but he didn't let me. "Let me say it, okay?" I nodded slowly. His foot brushed mine beneath the table. At first, I thought it was an accident. But then, it stayed. Just a soft, steady pressure. And when I looked up, his gaze met mine and didn't waver. "I've never admired anyone the way I admire you," he said. "You're everything." That word landed differently than I expected. Everything. And I wasn't sure what stunned me more, that he said it, or that a part of me wanted to believe it. I reached into my purse, suddenly needing to shift the moment, and pulled out the small gift I'd wrapped earlier, a watch. Sleek, simple, timeless. "For you," I said, handing it across the table. He opened it, eyes wide. "This is... wow." I leaned forward and fastened it around his wrist. "It fits." He looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "You always know what fits?" Then, just as I started to speak, just as the world seemed to quiet and center on the space between us, I heard a voice behind me. "Elise," I turned, heart kicking into my ribs. Standing by the door was my sister. There are moments in life that feel like still frames, silent, suspended, forever burned into memory. This was one of them. My sister Dana stood in the entryway of the restaurant, half inside, half uncertain. Her eyes moved from me to Micah and back again, landing on the candlelit space between us, the two untouched wine glasses, the quiet intimacy of our table. The way his hand still hovered too close to mine. Recognition bloomed across her face like a slow storm. "Didn't know you were out tonight," she said, stepping in, her voice light, but tight at the edges. Micah stood up, quickly brushing the napkin from his lap, clearing his throat. "I was just taking Mom out for dinner." "Mom." He hadn't called me that all night. It hit my ears like an apology. Dana's eyes lingered on me for a beat too long. Her gaze wasn't judgmental, not exactly, but it was curious, confused, skeptical, in the way only a sister's could be. She glanced at the dress I'd worn, the pendant resting just below my collarbone, then at Micah's hand still resting lightly on the back of my chair. "Happy birthday," she offered to him. Finally, a forced smile twitching at her lips. "Thanks," Micah said, his voice low. She gave a small nod, then walked away toward the host stand. But the space she left behind felt denser than when she arrived. I turned to Micah. He was still watching, the door, brows drawn together. "She doesn't understand," I said quietly. He looked back at me, and for the first time all night there was a flicker of hesitation. "That's okay," he said after a moment. "She doesn't have to." We sat again, but something had shifted. Not broken, just altered. Like a page had turned in a book we hadn't realized we were writing. Micah reached across the table, and this time, when his fingers brushed mine, he didn't pull back. His thumb lingered. Soft. Reassuring. Intentional. We didn't speak. The silence returned, but it wasn't strained. It was full. Full of everything unspoken. When the check came, he paid, insisted on it. His hand brushed mine again as he signed the receipt, and his eyes flicked up to meet mine, not as a boy asking for approval, but as someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The drive home was quiet, but not the awkward kind. It was the kind of quiet filled with thought, with presence. Street lights passed in slow rhythm, casting warm amber across the dash and catching the edge of Micah's jaw. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the gear shift, fingers tapping lightly, nervous maybe, or simply holding something in. He didn't say a word, but I could feel it. The gravity between us. When we pulled into the driveway, he didn't move to open the door. Neither did I. He turned to me, his face half lit in the darkness. And the way he looked at me, God. It wasn't the look of a son toward a mother. It wasn't innocent. But it wasn't wrong either. It was human. I meant what I said earlier, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Which part, I asked, though I already knew. He reached over, slowly tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered at my cheek. You're everything to me. I didn't speak. I didn't pull away. And when he leaned in slowly, carefully, like asking permission with every inch, I didn't stop him. Our lips met in a kiss that was hesitant, warm, trembling with things we didn't know how to name. Not rushed, not forced. Just real. His hand cupped my face like I was breakable. My fingers found the edge of his collar. There was no plan, no script. Only years of unspoken love, grief survival melting into a single moment that couldn't be undone. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested gently against mine. I've wanted to do that for a long time, he whispered. And in the quiet that followed, I let myself feel everything I'd buried. Not shame, not fear. Just the truth of what had grown between us. Something complicated, something unexpected, something undeniably real. We didn't speak after that. Not right away. Not in the car. Not even when we stepped through the front door, each of us caught in the hush that follows something irreversible. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was reverent. Micah locked the door behind us. I turned off the lamp in the entryway. And for a while, we just stood there, two silhouettes outlined by porch light, two people suspended in something too soft to shatter. I moved first, setting my purse down on the bench by the stairs. He followed, quiet footsteps behind mine, and when I turned, he was already looking at me again. Not with fear, not with confusion, with certainty. That look, the way his gaze settled on me like I was something sacred, was more intimate than the kiss. I don't expect you to explain this, he said, voice calm. To anyone. Not even to yourself. But I know what I feel. I swallowed hard. And what do you feel? He didn't hesitate. Safe. Understood. Whole. It would have been easier to call it a moment, to file it away as an accident born of pain and proximity, but we both knew better. This wasn't impulse. It had grown slowly, silently, through grief, through small kindnesses, through the spaces where we had quietly rebuilt each other. He stepped closer, reaching out. And this time, when he took my hand, I let him. Not because I didn't understand the lines we were towing, but because I did. And I still chose to stand there with him anyway. We ended up on the couch side by side. The house was dark except for the soft kitchen light still glowing down the hallway. A clock ticked faintly. Wind rustled the trees outside. Micah leaned his head on my shoulder again, just like he had that night after the photo box. Only this time, his hand found mine and held it. I used to hide in the hall closet, he said almost absently. When Dad yelled, when things got loud. I blinked. You never told me. He shrugged against my shoulder. I didn't want you to worry more than you already did. But I'd sit in there, between coats and boots, and just hold my breath. That's what I thought love was. What holding your breath? Being careful, staying small. I turned toward him, my throat tight. I'm so sorry. He shook his head. You didn't do that. He did. I let the silence hold us for a moment before whispering, and what do you think love is now? Micah's fingers squeezed mine gently. It's this, being seen, feeling peace when someone walks in the room, not fear. It's showing up for each other when the world doesn't. We stayed there until long past midnight. No confessions, no plans, just presence. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of toast and eggs. Micah was already in the kitchen humming. When I stepped in, he looked up and smiled. Not sheepish, not unsure. Just warm. Coffee's ready, he said. I saved you the last of the cinnamon creamer. I smiled back. You always remember. He handed me the mug, then paused. Elise, he said, using my name, not Mom. Whatever happens next. I just want you to know. This didn't come from nowhere. I met his eyes. I know. We didn't define it. Didn't label it. Some truths don't fit in neat little boxes. But that day, we moved through the house differently. Not as mother and son, not as something forbidden, but as two people who had quietly saved each other. And for now, that was enough.